On July 30th, 1975, Jimmy Hoffa drove to a restaurant outside Detroit to meet two men, and one of them was Tony Pro. Hoffa was never seen again. No body was ever recovered, and the case became the most famous disappearance in American history. The Irishman hands you a tidy answer that Frank Sheeran did it in a quiet house. But when the FBI drew up its own list of suspects, it kept coming back to the same New Jersey crew and the man they all worked for. If you know Tony Pro at all, you know him from A Plate of Ice Cream in Florida. In The Irishman, he is Stephen Graham in shorts and a golf shirt, strolling in late, needling Hoffa about respect until the two of them are shouting over Sundays. It plays as comedy with an edge, two old bulls who cannot stand each other. And the movie lets you laugh before it lets you worry. For most people, that is that is the whole of Tony Pro. A loud guy in the wrong outfit sitting across from a legend. What the film never gets around to telling you is that the man in the shorts had already buried his own second in command in an unmarked grave and would spend a quarter of a century running a union local like his personal collection agency. Anthony Provenzano was born on the Lower East Side in 1917, the son of Sicilian immigrants, and he quit school at 15 to haul freight for $10 a week. It is the part everyone skips because it does not fit the cartoon. By the time he was a grown man, he had two careers that were really one. On paper, he was a Teamster official climbing the ranks of Local 560 in New Jersey. In practice, he was a made member of the Genovese crime family, and the union was the family's cash register. Tony Pro was not a labor guy who dabbled in crime. He was a mobster who happened to own a union. By 1958, he was president of Local 560, and the Provenzano Group, as the courts would later call it, had the place locked down. A year after that, he sat in front of a United States Senate committee investigating labor racketeering and took the Fifth Amendment 44 times. The lawyer asking the questions was Robert Kennedy, a few years before he became Attorney General and made chasing men exactly like this one a personal mission. Those hearings were televised, and they were how a good chunk of the country first learned Tony Pro's name. A New Jersey Teamster who would not answer a single question about where the money went, 44 refusals, one after another. And the man doing the refusing was not sweating a drop. None of it was in the union handbook. Under the Provenzanos, Local 560 ran gambling and loan sharking and hijacking, and the steady earner was something they politely called labor peace. A trucking company would hand Tony Pro's people cash under the table, and in exchange, their trucks kept rolling and their warehouses stayed unburned. It was extortion, wearing a friendly name, and so routine that in 1963, a jury convicted him of squeezing the Dorn Transportation Company for exactly that kind of payoff. The conviction carried a 7-year sentence, though he stayed free on appeal until May of 1966, then served about 4.5 years and walked out in 1970. And it happened to put him in a cell down the hall from a man named Jimmy Hoffa. Hold on to that. It becomes the whole ball game later. Now, extortion is one thing. What Tony Pro did to Anthony Castellitto is the thing the movie could not have shown without switching genres. Castellitto was the secretary-treasurer of Local 560, the number 2 man in the building, 49 years old, a family man who kept a summer place up in the Catskills. He was well enough liked on the loading floors that members were starting to talk about him for the top job. That was his problem. Popular is a fatal condition when the number 1 man treats the union as private property. So in June of 1961, Castellitto was lured up to that very summer house in Kerhonkson in Ulster County, New York, and killed in his own kitchen where nobody would hear a thing. The crew was Sally Bugs Bergoglio, a freelance loan shark enforcer named Harold Konigsberg, and a man named Salvatore Sino, who would eventually put the entire night on the record. From inside witness protection, Bergoglio hit Castellitto twice in the head with a length of rubber hose packed with lead. Then they strangled him with a rope. His body has never been found. About a week later, by Sino's sworn testimony, Konigsberg met his boss. The two of them hugged and kissed like family at a christening, and Konigsberg walked out with an envelope holding $15,000. That was the going rate. That was what a man's life ran on the invoice. And then Tony Pro did the coldest thing in the whole story, which was the paperwork. Within weeks of Castellitto vanishing, his brother Sal became a trustee of the local that August. A month later, Bergoglio, the man who swung the hose, was rewarded with a business agent post. The dead man's chairs were filled by the family before the ground had settled, and every last appointment was clean and legitimate on paper. If you ask me, the reorganization is the scarier half of this. Anyone with the right phone number can order a killing. It takes a specific kind of mind to turn that killing into a personnel chart in under 90 days and call it union business. Everyone in that building watched it happen. You would think somebody would have said something. Nobody did. Members who crossed the Provenzanos faced beatings and bombings, and the ones who pushed hardest sometimes simply stopped coming to work permanently. A 27-year-old shop steward named Walter Glockner made the mistake of being both a loud opponent and a potential federal witness. He drove for Dorn, the same outfit Tony Pro had been convicted of squeezing, and one night he argued with one of Provenzano's relatives at a union meeting. The next morning, in May of 1963, he was shot 3 times in the back, stepping out of his Hoboken doorway for his shift a week before he was due to sit down with the Justice Department. And while Tony Pro himself was standing trial, Provenzano told reporters afterward that he had loved the man. Glockner, he said, looked just like his own son, the same dimples, the same smile. He had practically raised him, saved his job more times than he could count. And then he called him accident prone. There was a legend around the local that men who protested through the front door tended to leave through a plate glass window, and nobody who worked there ever treated it as a joke. And if you are the kind of person who wants the real story underneath the movie instead of the movie's version of it, go ahead and subscribe, because the part where the same crew runs the most famous vanishing act in American history is still ahead of us. Which brings us right back to that cell down the hall from Jimmy Hoffa. When Hoffa arrived at the Lewisburg Penitentiary in 1967, Tony Pro was already there, and the two of them started out as something close to friends. That did not survive contact. The break was money, the way it almost always was with Tony Pro. Even locked up, Hoffa kept drawing his full Teamster pension as president emeritus, a figure people put around $1.7 million. Provenzano had lost his own pension the instant he was convicted, and he wanted Hoffa to pull strings and get it reinstated. Hoffa would not lift a finger. A grudge over that kind of money between two men like that does not stay behind closed doors. It boiled over into a fistfight on the inside, a former International Union president trading punches with a Genovese capo, and as the story goes, at a later run in Hoffa, smashed a bottle over Provenzano's head. By the middle of the 70s, Hoffa wanted his old throne back, and to get it, he needed men like Tony Pro to bless the comeback, and Tony Pro flatly refused. And when Hoffa kept leaning on him, Provenzano reportedly told him he would rip his guts out with his bare hands and kidnap his grandchildren. The movie hands you this same feud as sniping over a late arrival in a pair of shorts. The reality was a documented threat against a man's children, delivered by a man who had already proven he would strangle his own deputy over a job title. So the ice cream scene is not a colorful aside. It is the single most misleading 2 minutes in the entire film, and it is staged for laughs. So on July 30th, 1975, when Jimmy Hoffa drove out to the Machis Red Fox restaurant in Bloomfield Township, the note on his calendar named only one man. It read TG 2 o'clock, Red Fox, and nothing else. TG was Anthony Giacalone, Hoffa's longtime handler with the Detroit mob. But Hoffa had told the people around him that Provenzano would be there too, that the sit-down was a peace conference, a chance for him and Tony Pro to bury the pension war and shake hands. Hoffa left his lake house at 1:15, stopped to see a friend who ran a limousine service in Pontiac, and reached the restaurant expecting exactly that. Nobody came. Around 2:30, an irritated Hoffa called his wife from a payphone in the hardware store parking lot behind the restaurant, complained that Giacalone had not shown, and said he had been stood up and would be home by 4 to grill steaks. That call is the last anyone ever heard from him. He was last seen getting into a maroon 1975 Mercury Marquis, a car owned by Giacalone's son Joseph and borrowed that day by Chucky O'Brien, the foster son Hoffa had all but raised. A car driven by family, which is exactly why he climbed in without a second thought. Here is where Tony Pro's talent for paperwork shows up one more time. He told investigators he was 600 miles away in Union City, New Jersey, playing cards with a man named Stephen Andretta, and denied ever scheduling the Detroit meeting at all. It was an alibi assembled like an accounting entry, tidy and dull and almost impossible to knock down. Against it, the government had almost nothing on paper. 4 employees at that limousine company could not recall the names Hoffa had mentioned on his way out, and only produced Giacalone's and Provenzano's later. Under hypnosis, the family arranged. A federal investigator said a witness had identified 3 Provenzano men: Sally Bugs Bergoglio, his brother Gabriel, and Thomas Andretta as the crew that took Hoffa. Dan Moldea, the author who dug deepest into the case, came to believe it was Bergoglio, not Frank Sheeran, who did the actual work. The movie reaches for the one confession that can never be checked and builds 3.5 hours on it. The people who gave this case their entire careers kept pointing at the guy in the shorts, and Bergoglio was already carrying something heavier than Hoffa. 17 years after he swung that lead-filled hose in Kerhonkson, Salvatore Bergoglio was awaiting trial for the murder of Anthony Castellito. So was the man who had ordered it. The 2 of them were co-defendants, tied to the same body that had never been found. And word was going around Little Italy that Sally Bugs might finally be talking to prosecutors. Whether it was true never mattered. On a rainy March night in 1978, around 10:30, 2 gunmen came up behind him without a word outside the Andrea Doria Social Club on Mulberry Street, knocked him to the sidewalk, and shot him 4 times in the face and once in the chest. He was 48 years old. The man who had done the killing for Tony Pro was now the man who could testify about it. And loose ends around Tony Pro had a reliable way of getting tied off right before they could say anything under oath. The Irishman shows you Bergoglio's death. It never tells you what he was standing trial for. It all caught up with Provenzano in the end, though never for Hoffa. In June of 1978, that same witness testimony out of Kerhonkson put him away for the murder of Anthony Castellito, and the sentence was 25 years to life. He picked up 2 more convictions from inside, a pension fund kickback scheme and a racketeering case that stacked on another 20 years. 10 years later, on December 12th, 1988, his heart gave out in a federal prison in California. He was 71. A spokesman said he had kept a low profile and caused no trouble, which is a peculiar epitaph for a man who spent 25 years being the trouble. In the hospital, he had asked for last rites, made his confession, and received absolution. And on the strength of that, the church broke with its own policy and allowed him a full funeral mass with a priest brought in from Manhattan to say it. But here's the thing, the convictions never touched. All through those years in a cell, Local 560 went right on working for him. Judge Harold Ackerman handed down his judgment in March of 1984, barring the old crew from the locale and removing the sitting board, an extraordinary move against an American labor organization. Then the order sat unenforced through 2 more years of appeals. Only in June of 1986, after the Supreme Court refused to hear the case, did it take effect, and Local 560 became the first union in American history placed under a federal civil racketeering trusteeship, the government stepping in to seize a union outright and pry the mob's fingers off it. And even that did not finish it. Prosecutors argued the Provenzano group kept running the local through loyal officers well into the trusteeship itself. 13,000 members, a federal judge, the Justice Department, and the Supreme Court all lined up against one man in a prison cell in California, and the union still answered to him. You do not build something that stubborn by accident. Tony Pro built an institution that outlived his own conviction and kept earning for him from behind bars. So go back to that plate of ice cream in Florida, the shorts and the punchline and the easy laugh the movie hands you. The film wanted you to remember that man, the comic heavy, wandering through somebody else's story. The record remembers a Genovese capo who strangled his own number 2, filled the dead man's job with his own brothers before the body was cold, and held 13,000 union members in a quarter century of fear. When the FBI drew up its list of suspects in the Hoffa case, the names ran through Detroit and Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Sheeran was on it, so was Bufalino and Giacalone and O'Brien. But every New Jersey name on that list, the Bergoglio brothers and the Andrettas, answered to one man, and he was eating ice cream in the movie while they worked. The Irishman gave you the tidy answer because a tidy answer is easier to shoot. The real one was never tidy, it was never funny, and it never got its day in a Detroit courtroom. If you want more of the true stories, the movies flatten into a punchline, subscribe, and I will have another one waiting for you next week.